was a senior in high school, our government teacher took us to downtown Flint to the IMA auditorium to hear a speaker. Turns out that all the schools in the county had sent school bus loads of students to hear this speaker. His name was Ralph Nader, and he was the scourge of General Motors, and we in Flint were in the hometown, the birthplace of General Motors. So to hear Ralph Nader speak to almost 10,000 people in the birthplace of his sworn enemy was quite a moment. And I remember being so inspired by his speech and so moved, and almost deciding at that moment that I had to live a different kind of life. I had to be active in a way that nobody had really taught us to be as a citizen of this country. But that day, that stuck with me forever. And Ralph Nader, to me, was a hero. Years later, I found myself out of a job. And Ralph Nader heard about that and said, come to D.C., work for me. I'll give you a job. And that's what I did. I went to Washington, D.C., and I worked at Ralph's headquarters for a couple of years. It was really an exciting time. I learned a lot. I put out a little weekly media critique newsletter called Moore's Weekly, and he funded it and provided the office space and the staff, and it was quite a good thing. But through my adult years, I've also had a complicated relationship with Ralph Nader. And after a couple of years there at his headquarters, and I decided to make my first movie, Roger and Me, about Flint and General Motors. He didn't like that and said that it was time to end the endeavor. And so I was once again out of a job and continued making the film, collecting unemployment while making it no income. And when the film came out and had become a big hit, people in his office publicly were critical of the film. And it really shocked me. It was kind of it felt like some kind of weird betrayal. I never understood it. But then you can't try to figure Ralph out. It's just not the way it works with him. But over the years, he continued to do all the good work that he had done. So many things that people today forget or don't even know, that we wouldn't have things like an environmental protection agency, like a National Highway Safety Department of Transportation, all these rules and regulations and things to save lives and protect our food and water and all on and on and on. It would take the rest of the podcast to tell you all the good that Ralph Nader has done and all the lives he has saved, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of lives. There never would have been a seatbelt in a car or an airbag. There wouldn't be, oh my God, I could just go down the hole again. You get the point. And so when he decided to run for president in 2000, and because I, at that time, and actually for a decade or two before that time, had been writing about and talking about the situation with our environment, with our planet. Nobody was talking about this stuff, and Ralph was, and the Green Party was. And I thought the Green Party was a good idea, that the Democratic Party needed something on its left to nudge it, push it, poke it, do whatever was needed to be done to try and create a more equitable society and try to save this planet. And so Ralph's idea was that we have to have the Green Party on the ballot in every state, and the way to do that is all we need is 5% of the vote. 5% of all Americans who voted for the Green Party. Green Party would stay on the ballot throughout the country. That's not 5% per state. It was a combined 5% of all. So in other words, let's say nobody voted for the Green Party in 20 states, but in the other 30 states it equaled 5% of the total vote of the whole country. Then the Green Party existed. And his plan was that he would go and campaign in the states that would not hurt the Democratic candidate. In this case, it was Al Gore. So he would campaign in states like California, New York, states that were already going to go blue or red, Republican or Democrat. Texas, campaigned there. There's no way that the Democrat was going to win Texas. Actually, most of the South. But not campaign in the swing states where it might hurt Al Gore. And so a whole bunch of people, well-known people much more well-known than I was, Eddie Vedder of Pearl Jam, and Patti Smith, and a whole bunch of people got on board the bus to go and speak at rallies, to play at rallies for Ralph. We had great turnouts. Things were going fine in them. It was time for the debate commission to decide who would get to be who would get to be on the stage at the presidential debates. And Al Gore was insisting that Ralph Nader not be allowed on the stage. Obviously, because he was afraid it would hurt him. But again, the Nader strategy was not to hurt him, was just to go and campaign in the states where it was kind of already decided who, was going to win that state. But once Gore went about convincing successfully the debate commission to not let Ralph Nader in the debates, that's when things went awry for Ralph. And Ralph no longer cared about helping Gore or not hurting Gore, and decided to start campaigning in the swing states. And this went back on what he had promised to do to myself and to others. And so a bunch of us got off the bus. We couldn't support that. We couldn't allow George W. Bush to become president of the United States. I was so terrified that what Ralph was doing was going to hurt Gore and help Bush, that in the last week before the 2000 election, I put together my own tour of the one state I thought this was going to come down to, Florida. And I went from city to city throughout Florida, and I billed the tour as a Nader voter asks you to vote for Gore. And my pitch was, look, I live in New York State. Gore's going to win New York State by a huge margin. So I have the luxury of voting for Ralph Nader, and I will vote for Ralph Nader in New York State. But you in Florida, it's way too close here, and you don't have that luxury. If you like Ralph and you're for Ralph, I'm asking all the Nader voters in Florida to please vote for Al Gore. And on one of the last nights there before the election, I was in Tallahassee, and the next morning I woke up and I walked out onto the street, and walking right by me on the promenade was Governor Jeb Bush. And he sees me and I see him, and he walks over to me and he holds out his hand to shake my hand, and he says to me, "How much did the Democrats pay you to come down here?" And I said, "Not enough." Of course, they didn't pay me anything, but the headline that morning in the Tallahassee newspaper was something to the effect of Nader supporter Moore, vote Gore. It was like on the front page. So Bush had seen that. And, this is not, of course, what the Bush people wanted. They wanted all the Nader voters in Florida to get out there and vote for Nader. And here I was crisscrossing the state telling Nader voters, as a Nader voter myself, that in Florida, you can't do that. You got to vote for Gore. You cannot let Bush get into the White House. So, was I successful? Well, yes. Once they finally counted all the votes a year later, they realized that Gore had, in fact, won. But Daddy Bush's justices on the Supreme Court put an end to the vote counting in Florida, wouldn't let the vote be finished, and then voted and ruled in favor of Sonny's candidacy. So Bush's appointees to the Supreme Court ended up essentially guaranteeing and saying that the new president of the United States would be George W. Bush. And that was that. Well, of course, a lot of people ended up blaming Ralph Nader for this. But, of course, they were making the assumption that Ralph's voters, if there had been no Green Party on the ballot, would have voted for Gore. And I knew that was a false assumption, because a lot of these Green voters will never vote for a Democrat, and they would have stayed home. Nonetheless, that became the mantra, and people were filled with hate toward Ralph Nader. I didn't catch a whole lot of crap from people, mainly because I had made it very clear that in the swing states you had to vote for Gore, and then I, on my own dime, did my own tour in the week leading up to the election of Florida to try and make sure that that state would not vote, not only not vote for Bush, but not vote for Nader either. And I, again, it felt really let down by Ralph. And maybe that's on me. That part I'm guilty of, that I made the assumption that Ralph wouldn't do what he did. But he was angry. He had a right to be angry. He shouldn't have been kept out of the debates. Nonetheless, we ended up with Bush, and then we ended up in a horrific war. We also were attacked, and when Bush was notified a month before the 9/11 attacks that Osama bin Laden was planning to attack the United States, probably via airplanes. He was on vacation and chose to pay no attention to the memo that he received from the National Security Agency, and so there was no preparation, and everyone caught off guard on 9/11, 2001. So the rest of the story. You know how it all went down, and it made the idea that if Ralph had cost the election feel even worse to anybody who had anything to do with it. But especially to Ralph, and he became persona non grata, and nobody, he was no longer invited on to talk shows. He was not invited to anything. He was a pariah. And he and I didn't talk to each other for a very, very, very long time. It was really the second time that I'd been let down by him. But I'm a big boy. I realize this is how politics works. You can't take any of this too personally, and it really isn't personal. It's not about me. It's about what happened to this country, and it's what happened to the world as a result of having George W. Bush as president of the United States. And so there I was 2 weeks ago, not even 2 weeks ago, hopped on a train to D.C. I wanted to be there for the impeachment. Didn't know if we could get in. Went to the office on the Capitol Hill of our congressman from Flint, Dan Kildee, to see if he could get me tickets to get in. And as I opened the door to enter his office, there is Ralph Nader right there. I was in shock for a minute, and I shook his hand and greeted him, and we got talking a little bit about what he was doing and what was going on. He was going from door to door to different members of Congress to give them his new book. This is on impeachment day. He's literally delivering books to members of Congress. But I had heard over the years from members that actually they talk to Ralph and his staff quite often. Ralph is still going 20 years after that fateful election in the year 2000. Here's Ralph Nader, still at work. He's 85 years old, still doing this, still fighting the fight, and still having his staff do all this research. And they used this research. Members of Congress are using research done by Ralph's office. This has been going on for years. The public doesn't know this. But they've maintained, especially certain Democrats have maintained a relationship with his office because he's the man. He's the guy that's done the work. He's the guy that does the research. And all the young people in his office that do all this work, all the young women and men there that do this research and share it with Congress, all in the interest of helping us, you and me. And there was Ralph right there, standing there on impeachment day. And I said, "So what have you been up to?" And he said, "Well, a number of things. I'm really fighting Boeing now with the 737 MAX jets, the two that crashed, and one in Ethiopia, one in Indonesia." And I thought, that sounds like something Ralph would be doing. He'd be trying to do something to make sure these planes are safe. And Dan was standing there, Congressman. He said, it sounds like an idea for a book, Unsafe at Any Altitude. We all kind of laughed and thought that was, actually, that would be a good book. And then Ralph said to us, my great niece was on the plane in Ethiopia that crashed, and she died. And it got kind of quiet in the office there. I said, "Oh, I'm really sorry to hear that, Ralph." He said, "No, she was 24. She was a good woman. She was there helping people in Africa, and she's dead now because of a corporation decided to cut some corners and save some money in this kind of corporate serial killing of the people that died on these two crashes. And his eyes kind of welled up, and he said, "I'm not going to let them get away with this." And I said, "Hey, I know we're supposed to go over to the impeachment. It's happening right now. Do you have a half hour? I'd love to sit down. I have my podcast equipment with me." I said, "Would you do a podcast with me right now? I'd love to talk to you and catch up after all these years." And he said, "Yeah, sure." And I said to the congressman, "Do you mind if we use your office here?" And he said, "No, sure. Come right in here and give some privacy." And we sat down and we spoke for the first time, and for any given length of time in almost 20 years. And that's what you're going to hear now. My half hour or so with an old comrade, a fighter for the common good, and someone who I want to ask you, listening to this, I want you to consider that perhaps, maybe, it's time to forgive Ralph. It's time for some redemption. Ralph would probably say that he doesn't need any forgiveness, and he, in some ways, might be right. But I think that we need everybody now, all hands on deck, to get rid of Trump. And in this interview, you'll hear that he knows that too. And at the end of it, well, you'll hear. I came to my own conclusions about my own complicated history with Ralph Nader. And I'm really happy to share this kind of rollicking, somewhat intimate conversation with him here on Rumble with Michael Moore. So now I'm in the Cannon office building here on Capitol Hill, the House office building. This is for a certain number of representatives have their offices right across the street from the House of Representatives. And I ducked into our congressman from Flint, Michigan, Dan Kildee, and to see him. And coming out of the door was none other than Ralph Nader. And it was both stunning and wonderful to see him. It's been a number of years since I've seen Ralph in person. And I asked him if he would just sit down with me here in Representative Kildee's office. And he graciously, the representative, allowed us to sit in here and talk to Mr. Nader for a few minutes. Ralph, welcome, first of all, to my podcast. And how are you celebrating Impeachment Day here in D.C.?
Well, too many of the Democrats are prefacing their remark, Michael, by saying this is a sad day. It's not a sad day. It's a glorious day to hold President Trump, lawless outlaw that he is, buffoon, ignorant, narcissistic, racist, sexist, sexual predator, serial liar, inciter to violence, just for starters.
Is that all you got, Ralph, really?
Yeah.
Right. You're right. It's always a glorious day whenever we take our Constitution and enact its powers in favor of the people. But it is on the level that it's sad on is that we, the people, should not have had to suffer for 3 years with this individual who's in the White House and what he's been doing. And I'm not talking about just the big stuff that we all know about, why he's being impeached. Yeah. I'm talking about every day his administration has cut out a regulation out of the EPA, has given over more of our public lands to oil and gas companies. I mean, you just go down the list. He's made our oceans more dangerous. These things don't even appear on the news anymore because we're so consumed with the fact that he conspired with people in another country to rig the next election.
The Democrats went with a narrow assault. Basically, they went with the Ukraine, which doesn't move the public opinion needle, important as that is in terms of influencing the next election. But they had 10 other arrows in their quiver. He's impeaching himself in one area after another. The gross contempt of Congress beyond the Ukraine, number one. the spending money that's not authorized. That violates the power of the purse that would have outraged James Madison.
He did that. Yep.
The emoluments, enriching himself, lawless wars
Every
overseas.
day. Yep.
And the other one, which you alluded to, he is shredding the life-saving protections and the health protections of the American people by disabling and dismantling EPA and Occupational Safety and Health Administration, the Auto Safety Agency, crushing the civil servants, pushing out the scientists. Why isn't that an impeachable offense? That was right in the House Judiciary Report, Michael. They made a big deal out of the defiant refusal to enforce the law. He's turned the U.S. government over to the pollution, poison lobby and the greed lobby.
I can tell you why they chose this route. I'm not in on the inner circle of how they made the decision to do the impeachment. But I think, look, it's kind of like a comedian has to know the room. You have to read the room. And I think Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats correctly read the room that list, I cut you off. There's 30 or 40 more things on that list. It's so many things. The American people who work hard every day. Many of them work 2 jobs. Some of them work 3 jobs. They're barely able to keep their heads above water, to try to keep track, to try to focus the American public around 40 articles of impeachment. I mean, it's like me asking you right now, name the 32 teams in the NFL. Go ahead, Ralph.
Yeah.
I'm waiting.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Can you name them? No.
I can name a lot of them, but
a lot of them. Yeah, but that's the point.
It's like
in order for this to work,
it's like Michael Schmidt of the New York Times said on Meet the Press. The Democrats haven't been able to get their arms around this guy. He's always 10 lies ahead of them.
Yes.
10 insults ahead of them, violating this, violating that. Doesn't spend any time on the government overseeing his crooks, his corrupt heads of these agencies. And they're going to give him a pass. You know what he's going to say? He's going to say Nancy Pelosi had the majority. She could have passed all those wild charges that I violated the Constitution, but she didn't do it. And don't you know why? Because it's all lies. It's all fake. I didn't do anything wrong. He's going to say that 1,000 times.
I love your Trump impersonation. But that is the genius of him. And I've tried to say this from the beginning when I first said before the election that he was going to win. I mean, I live in Michigan. I could see what was going on. And of course he showed up. He had a rally every week leading up to the election, and Hillary unfortunately only came once or twice to Michigan, didn't go at all to Wisconsin, and I went to a couple of his rallies, and I'm like, wow, this guy is good. And if you don't respect your opponent, if you don't actually have some sort of, I don't know what the word is, not admiration, but some sort of understanding of who the enemy is.
Know thy adversary.
Well, I think simple. A lot of liberals just wanted to go, oh, Trump, no one's going to vote for him.
It's going to be a coronation.
It's going to, reality show. People love reality shows. Yeah. He was on for 14 seasons. Yeah. You know how many seasons I was on with my show? 4. Yeah. Okay. I mean, Seinfeld, what did he get? 7 or 8? I'm telling you, Friends, maybe a dozen, maybe. I don't think a dozen. But Trump, 14 seasons. And out where I live, I understood why, we don't know Trump. We don't know Trump in Michigan. Who's Trump? We don't know anything about Queens. We don't even know what Queens is. Here's what we know about Queens. Archie Bunker was from there, and Trump. That's it. 2 bigots on different sides of the economic scale. That's all we know about Queens.
Well, I just put out a book with Mark Green called Fake President on Trump. And my epilogue is directed to the Trump voter.
It's called Fake President?
Fake President.
Fake President.
Why are they writing off the Trump voter? If they read the epilogue, you get my take on how to convey and communicate with Trump voters, who he has betrayed 1,000 ways.
That's a great title. By the way, it's a little redundant. If I can say, you now when you say president, you don't need to say fake. We already know the fakery that's going on.
There are 100,000 workers exposed to silicosis, and he's breaking the protection of OSHA, and they're dying.
Do you want to try to actually convince Trump voters to change their minds? Yeah, wow, that's a lot of work. I did that the first year, and I think a lot of 8 million Obama voters voted for Trump. Yeah. Okay, so we can reach out and we can convince them. I know a lot of them, people in Flint and Saginaw and Detroit, who didn't like Trump at all, certainly not personally, but they wanted to throw a hand grenade or a Molotov into the system that had let them down. And so Bernie appeared to be that to people too. So
Yeah, but he also, Michael, he also lied like crazy. He was going to get him more manufacturing jobs. It's a lie. He was going to get him cleaner air, water, and health insurance. A lie. He was going to cut their taxes. A lie. He cut the taxes for the rich, created a deficit, drained the money for the repair of the infrastructure, and sent the bill to the children and grandchildren of America, and including their grandchildren. Would they ever tolerate having a relationship with a neighbor or a friend or a coworker who was that kind of monster, immoral monster, liar, sexual predator? I don't buy this. I think what's happened is they hated the alternative so much, and they hated Washington turning their back on them so much that they saw this bomb thrower, and they said we're gonna send our votes to him.
Yeah, I think that is what happened. But now the people that are for Trump, after watching him for 3 years, if they're still for him, I think whatever energy we have left in us, because we're all filled with this despair, there's a malaise that's across the country right now. All our focus has to be on getting out the people on our side, the people who believe in these things that we believe in. Don't stay home this time. Let's come out. Let's get everybody out.
It's all about getting the vote out of the non-voters. There's going to be 110 million non-voters.
Largest political party in America,
right? The
non-voting party.
You get 10 million out in 7 states and start in August, September, October, developing relationships.
Boom. We win. Mic drop.
Yeah.
Yes.
Potluck suppers. And then you give them transportation to the polls.
Yes. That's how I want our energy to be focused in this coming year. Those who are listening to this now, you've got a conservative brother-in-law. You've just had Thanksgiving dinner with him last month. You're going to have Christmas dinner again. Maybe you'll get through it again. Maybe you won't. Maybe he shouldn't be invited, just because the children are at the table and they don't need to hear these, comments, bigoted comments. But Ralph, I don't know. I think my energy now is just getting out our people, getting out the non-voters, getting out 70%.
Have you heard of this movement in Kentucky, Ditch Mitch?
No.
Well, it's a nonprofit, civic, get out the vote, and they've already raised $5 million. They've got staff all over Kentucky.
Wow.
And they don't trust the Democrats to beat the worst campaigner in modern American histrry.
Well, how are they going to ditch him? How are they going to ditch him then?
Because they're
vote for a Democrat.
Because the Democrat who's challenged him was a former fighter pilot. She thinks she doesn't need any co-pilots, right? So they think she's going to make the same mistake trying to be both ways in Kentucky, Republican, Democrat. Yeah. So they're saying we're going to get out an independent mass turnout of votes. Now,
to vote for who?
Well, they're not saying, but they know, to vote against McConnell.
Yeah, but all those votes have got to go into one pot.
Yeah,
to get him out of there.
That's obvious.
Okay, you don't want to state the obvious.
Yeah.
I'll state it for you.
Yeah.
You have to vote for the Democrat.
Yeah.
Okay, we can say that. Hey, we go back a long way, you and I. Okay, no, seriously. People still come up to me on the street who remember, the Green Party and all this, and they're like, still yelling at me. And
this guy who runs Ditch Mitch, he's got the model for the country.
Which is what?
Which is civic, parallel, get out the vote. You don't have to beg the Democrats. Phone banks don't work, a few days before the election. They don't know how to get out the vote. So you have a parallel movement, Florida, Ohio, Wisconsin, Michigan, to get out the vote. Now you have Bloomberg's willing to put millions of dollars.
That's what he should be doing.
But he really doesn't know how to do it.
No.
He thinks just ads? No. You have people on the ground in the neighborhoods. You get the influentials.
Right. No, I'm going to have
develop relationships.
I'm going to have him on my podcast here in the coming weeks, and I'm going to tell him, Mike. All right, your job in this election, you're the bank. You're the bank, and that's what you need to do. Not run for president. Just be the bank. And you're like the ATM machine for Democrats who are running for ballot proposals on gun control and whatever. Mike Bloomberg. Hi, I'm Mike Bloomberg. I'm the bank. That's his job. Okay. But I just want to say before, it's so wonderful running into you, and we're heading back over to the gallery there.
It's too bad they don't have songs at the end of the vote. They should play "America the Beautiful."
Yeah. I thought when Nancy Pelosi went up and she had the American flag there at the beginning, I thought she was going to ask everybody to stand and do that, or the Pledge of Allegiance or something to just, look, can we just acknowledge that this country actually did stand for something, that we are about something, that we're still a work in progress, and we're going to have our finest hour today by doing what we're doing. And
there'll be a round two. There's got to be a round two
well, I'll tell
on
you what
impeachment.
can I just tell you what round two is? And I'll tell the Democrats I run into here today, after this is done today, I know you all want to go home for Christmas.
But you ought to let Congresswoman Slutkin go on the offensive. Teach her how to go on the offensive in Michigan, because they're putting her on the defensive.
No, I know.
And those 10 moderates changed the whole ballgame because Nancy wants the job back.
She spent a lot of time.
Narrow.
She spent a lot of time in the CIA.
Yeah.
I know her. I am planning to have a little bit of during the holidays. I'll have some kind of, there's the thing where you have to, when you're ex-CIA, you've got to go through a kind of a relearning.
Give her the book, Fake President. We're going to stop by her office.
Oh, that's good.
This gets you on the offensive against Trump. You don't win by being defensive.
The second thing that the Democrats have to do as soon as this vote is done is there are, I think, close to 250 bills that this House has passed. I want people, first of all, to know the people who came out, the non-voters came out in the off-year election. They came out and they made this a Democratic House, and they put a lot of women in. And if they don't see any result from that, I don't know if they'll come back again and vote. I need them to come back and vote. I need them to know at least that the Democrats passed 250 bills. And HR 1, the very first bill that got passed, know this.
Campaign finance.
This is like something you wrote 40 years ago about how our elections are run, how it should be simple and easy for people to be able to vote instead of all the roadblocks. And why doesn't the Senate? They've not passed a single one of these bills. They won't pass them. They won't even talk about them. This has been a very active, very busy House session, and all this stuff just sits on Mitch McConnell's desk, and they
don't know how to nail them with the names of the bills. They just say 200 bills are over there. He hasn't signed them.
Well, this podcast we're going to have a special section on this podcast called "Pass the Bills," and not pass the buck, pass the bills, and we are going to name the bills. If they don't actually have a real name, for Operation, Fog of War.
The way the Republicans have.
Yeah. I got names for all of them.
The clean estuary bill by the Republicans is to poison the estuary.
Exactly. Right. So, but this is where our side, we always need a little help, which is weird that we have a communication problem when we are the writers, the communicators, the artists, all the things they rail against, Hollywood, et cetera. And somehow we're unable to often communicate what this really says in very, very simple language.
Remember what Kevin Phillips said. The Republicans go for the jugular and the Democrats go for the capillaries.
Yeah.
They're much more aggressive with less
I know that's because
evidence.
We're kinder people. We don't go for the jugular. All that blood sprays everywhere and people die. We don't want anybody to die. We are filled with a heart that has love in it. I believe Nancy Pelosi when she says this. That she was raised this way. I do believe. For Trump to say that she doesn't pray,
in the meantime,
I actually believe she prays. And listen, I, as you know, have not been over the years a big supporter of Nancy Pelosi, but I seriously want to start a GoFundMe page to build a statue to her. Just because how she has pulled this off it's been amazing.
This business of
Admit it, it's been amazing to watch
this business of
how she's done this.
This business of caution by Nancy she's lost 4 out of 5 last congressional election.
That's the past, Ralph.
This is the
new Nancy.
The future is this.
This is Nancy. She's older than Bernie.
You're dealing
just saying.
The Democrats are dealing with a corrupt government of corporatism, militarism, and nepotism.
Correct.
What are they waiting for?
Right. Well, I think that this day, today, is a turning point in that. And many of them, if John F. Kennedy was alive and if he was writing a sequel to Profiles in Courage, these 15 plus Democrats that are running in districts that Trump won in 2016, it's been a real profile in courage so far today to hear them stand up there and say what they've said, knowing it could cost them the election. And they put their country and they put truth and honesty ahead of their own political agenda and their career. That's been a powerful thing to see today. And I'm guessing it's inspired other members of Congress to this is not my time to just sit back and be quiet. So we're here on actually a historic day. And I think many epiphanies are taking place, not just on the House floor, not just in the gallery, but all across this country. And we're gonna zoom out of the gate. Everybody's gonna be talking to their families over the holidays. And this will have been an exhilarating moment for all of us. I truly, truly believe that. And as you know, you can't get more pessimistic than me.
Yeah.
So hear me out when I say
this is just the first step. We have to have round 2 with all the other articles of impeachment that have destroyed the Constitution, imperiled the Republic, because otherwise he's going to get away with it, and he's going to gloat all the way through to Election Day. Who do you predict is going to win in November? You predicted right in 2016 when you said Trump was going to win. Everybody laughed at you.
Well, it's not next November, and I'm not a soothsayer.
Okay.
If the election were today, who would win?
Yeah.
I hate to say it, Donald J. Trump. I mean, I'm sorry. Here's what I actually believe. If the election were today, Hillary won by 3 million votes in the popular vote. The Democrat, whoever the Democrat would be on the ballot tonight, that Democrat would win the popular vote by 4 to 5 million votes. And Trump could still win the
Selected
Electoral
by
College.
the Electoral College.
Exactly.
Which the Republicans, the Democrats have lost 2 elections since 2000 because they won the popular vote, lost the Electoral College, and you still can't get them to go after the Electoral College and join the National Popular Vote.
I'll be the first to say that as a citizen of this country, I should have been organizing something the day after the Supreme Court that was appointed by Bush's dad appointed the Sonny Boy as president of the United States while they were still counting the ballots in Florida. Just one more example of how we don't have a true democracy. And I should have the next day with others. You should have. We all should have done this. We should have made the attempt to get rid of the Electoral College back then.
You know, it's underway now. They got over half.
It's called the National Popular Vote. We may not be able to get rid of the Electoral College, but we have enough states now. Do you know about this, Dan, the National Popular Vote? There's been enough states now with 196 electoral votes. We only need 270.
That's right.
100 have passed this law that says our state's electors will go to whoever wins the popular vote nationwide. Even if our state didn't vote for that person, we believe the person in the White House should be the person the American people wanted. We've got enough states that have passed that law to equal 196 electoral votes.
And the Democratic Party is not making a big deal out of this.
So there's only 74 more. Yeah, well, what I've said to Republicans is, you want to support this because this could come back on you someday. You're going to wish that the popular vote was the real vote. So if anybody listening to this, look up nationalpopularvote.org. It's a really good idea. We're only 74 electoral votes away, states that hold those votes.
It was proposed and run by Steve Silverstein, an entrepreneur from San Francisco. He's got 7 staff, and they've gotten all these bills through California, Illinois, Connecticut, Maryland, 7 staff. It's a lot easier than we think.
Before we go, I want to just say this. You brought up the 2000 vote where you were running the Green Party. And of course, you have heard this since then. People blame you and this and that and whatever.
Except Gore doesn't. He knows who he's got 10 others to blame.
That's what I was just going to tell you. So I was speaking in Nashville a few years ago, and he heard I was speaking there, and he called me up, got my number somehow, and he said, "Why don't you come over for breakfast tomorrow if you're going to still be here? Tipper and I will make you breakfast." I said, "Oh, wow, great, free food, me, right?" So, anyway, I went over there the next morning. My other sister went with me, and we sat there on stools in the kitchen as he and Tipper made the ham and eggs and really wonderful breakfast. And I said to him, geez, I'm just wondering how you feel, whether it's about me or anybody, about the election. Do you blame Ralph for your loss? And he said to me, absolutely not. He said, that is the absolute wrong way to look at it. I blame me. Why? He said, I didn't allow President Clinton to go around and campaign for me. And he started listing these.
Arkansas.
Yeah. Even in Arkansas.
If you won Arkansas, you'd been president.
Done. Exactly. So he
won the popular vote, remember, by 500,000.
He won the popular vote.
It was stolen from him in Florida in 7 different ways.
Yes.
And then the Supreme Court, Scalia, 5-4.
Yes.
Judicial coup d'etat.
Yes.
Put Bush in office.
He said that he wishes that people were not angry at you. They should be angry at him. And he said, and this is what he said to me. He said, because in the end, Mike, it's my responsibility to convince you or anybody who is thinking of voting for the Green Party. It's up to me to convince you to vote for me. And if somehow I failed to do that, I don't know if this is the wrong podcast. I have a story to tell you. No, I'm serious. Maybe I should just tell it now. I got a call.
Yeah.
John, your chief of staff, knows the story.
Yeah.
John Richard. I got a call a week, 10 days before the election, and they knew Florida was going to be very close. And so someone from the Gore campaign called me and said, you're close to Ralph. What could we do to convince him to, yes, tell everybody vote green in California and New York and Texas and wherever it doesn't, it wouldn't hurt the election. To have him tell Nader voters in Florida to please, just in Florida, vote for Gore. We want to talk to Ralph. We want to talk to him about, just tell us what position could Gore think about altering that would be more progressive, whether it was healthcare, union issues, whatever. Could we talk to Ralph? I think also they had brought up on the phone of they would be very interested in talking to you about a cabinet position. So the voters, your supporters, would know that you would have a voice in the administration. And I said, well, first of all, you don't know Ralph. There's no quid pro quo with Ralph. I mean, it's just not, But I know that Ralph is smart enough politically to know that if you can appoint the right people, if you will change your position to make it better on healthcare or whatever, I'm sure he'd want to talk to you.
It's better than that. We pushed minimum wage in Florida, which is a winning issue. Won the referendum, as you know, a few years later.
But your chief of staff,
and he wouldn't do it.
I know, but your chief of staff came back to me and said, "No, we don't want to talk."
But when I was in Florida, who cares who picks these up? I gave the Democrats, Republicans the whole platform. Kerry, be the author, take the praise. But the one thing they could have won was the minimum wage issue, because a few years later, up against the Walmarts and all, the people won a referendum.
Ralph, you've been
in
right.
Florida.
You've been right on this stuff forever.
Yeah.
All the ideas that now I think most people in the Democratic Party subscribe to was originated by you. And whether it is, we're talking about minimum wage or healthcare, safety issues, environmental issues, you're the OG. You know what that means, the OG? You're like the dude, the original guy. You got it all going back in the 1960s. I mean, people are alive today because you got laws passed with seatbelts and airbags. Literally, thousands more Americans would be dead had not Ralph Nader been on this earth. I mean, that your legacy is intact in this way.
No, we got to look for the future because they're rolling everything back.
But my question
Trump is rolling it back.
My question to you about 2000 is, when there was that week or two there where I said to your chief of staff, you are literally the most powerful person in America right now because you could actually help solidify Gore's win. And you can get things for us politically that we needed back then. And you held that power and you chose not to use it. And I'm wondering why. Because, man, that would be the most envious position to be in, where you could have said, yes, I'll help you in Florida if you'll do this for the people.
Well, it would have been looked at very cynically, but I don't have retroactive clairvoyance. I thought he was going to take Florida. Who would ever dream this bumbling governor from Texas who couldn't put three sentences together with a horrible record in Texas against children and pollution and so on would have taken that close? By the way, he lost Florida. You know the recount a year later with the media?
Yeah.
He lost Florida. The Florida Supreme Court ordered recount that was blocked by Scalia and the Supreme Court 5-4. Yeah. That would have ended up saying he won Florida because, the hanging chags, all the shenanigans. He won Florida. Who would ever dreamed he would have lost?
So you didn't have
Florida?
a sense that you held this power?
No way.
Wow.
Who would have thought that Bush was going to win to begin with? Because he didn't win the popular vote.
Right.
He lost the popular vote.
That's right.
Anyway.
Well, listen, you are a hero still to millions and millions of Americans. And regardless whether people have a disagreement about 2000 or whatever, nobody will ever fault or say a bad word about how you have spent your life fighting for people. I know you personally. I know what you've given up. You've not been able to have the normal life that normal people get to have. You've devoted your entire waking moment
and unwaking moments.
And I'm probably your
I have nightmares.
But I'm telling you, this man eats really healthy. There's a lot of garlic on the plate. I'm just saying that there's some Lebanese, your parents had a restaurant, I think, right? Yeah, in Connecticut.
Yeah.
So you were raised in that Lebanese restaurant. You keep eating that Lebanese food, and you look 20 years younger than I do.
And now we have the only law museum in the world, my hometown, the American Museum of Tort Law. Tort law is wrongful injury, sexual assaults, opiates, product defects, contaminated water, food. Tortmuseum.org. By the way, the big lesson from 2000 is the Democrats began to scapegoat. Instead of looking in the mirror, saying, why haven't we landslided the worst Republican Party in history? They're looking for scapegoats. They even blamed the little Green Party in 2016, Dr. Stein. So they got to start looking in the mirror.
I think that has happened, Ralph.
Yeah.
I think it happened in 2018 in the off-year election, and you're sitting right here. We are right here outside the place where the Democrats are standing up and doing what we need them to do. And this man has to go. That guy who has our Oval Office, our White House, that he has got to go. And I just want to believe, I know this is a crazy thought, that the Senate, hey, how about this, Trump? You can keep the majority of Republican senators. There's 53 of them. You can keep 33 of them. You have the majority. But I want to believe that of the 20 that are left, that there's 10 of them that are in the Mitt Romney sort of thinking, where I do believe they have actual core beliefs, religious beliefs, and Trump must seem like the devil to them.
Oh, sure.
When they're not in front of a camera or a microphone. They know who he is. That's 10 of those Republicans. And another 10, just for their own self-interest. If they don't vote to remove him, we're going to remove them come November. Watch what's going to happen. I mean, if there's one prediction I feel good about, is that we're going to have a Democratic Senate next year. And it's going to be maybe by more than just the 3 we're going to need to flip it. And I think those Republicans who are on the edge of possibly being tossed, they know it too. And this is their moment to take a stand for righteousness. And so in my fantasy world, those 20 Republicans, frankly, I think all we need is a subpoena to see what else they put on that server in the White House than the Ukraine call. They've been putting shit on that server, Ralph, for 3 years.
It's an opportunity.
They've been hiding stuff there. Yeah. I want to know what's there, because I think when the American people hear the other calls that are there, they won't need a map to go find out where, because nobody knows where Ukraine is. But when the American public hears what else is on there, it will be so audacious.
Think of all the emails where he's done in the American worker, the American consumer, patience.
Not just the emails and the tweets. I'm talking about this is Republicans, if you're listening, man, you ever hear of the Whigs? You're in an implosive moment. And I don't think you know just how bad it's going to be for you. And we actually don't want to tell you how bad it's going to be, because then you might actually do something. But I think we'd rather you do the right thing and remove Trump. We'd be willing to have maybe the Senate will be, 51-49, but you remove him, you might save yourselves. Maybe. Yeah. I believe in redemption, Ralph, including for you and for me.
And you're okay with a penny for your pence.
A penny for your pence. Listen, don't be afraid of Mike Pence. All right. If he ends up being the candidate, he'll be the easiest person to defeat.
Make sure he doesn't have dinner with a woman who isn't his wife.
Yeah. Well, geez, I don't even want to go there, Ralph. We've been talking to Ralph Nader here on my podcast. This is Michael Moore. You're listening to Rumble with Michael Moore. Ralph, we got to get back over to the gallery, and see what's going on over there. And I have to have who's the Roman that I guess any of them, right? Nero,
Caligula.
Well, I'm not going there, Ralph, either. Ralph, this is what happens when you pass. How old are you now, Ralph? How old are you? Seriously?
I don't say.
No, come on. We can look it up. There is Google.
The only true aging is the erosion of your ideals.
Yeah, you're sharp as a tack, first of all. And number two, you have never eroded any of your ideals.
Thank you very much, Michael.
Thank you.
I appreciate that.
Thank you for having a conscience, and thank you for fighting for the rest of us, and we love you for it.
Yeah.
Never
You
forget
too.
that.
You too.
Well, there's jury's still out on me, but thank you for what you've done.
Thank you, Michael.
All right, let's get back over to the House of Representatives. And off I went back to the House of Representatives, where I was able to sit there in the gallery, watch the debate and the vote, and witness the third only president ever impeached in the history of the United States that night. But on the way back home, I thought a lot about this conversation with Ralph. And I thought, yes, look, that's just who I am. I believe in redemption. I believe it's ridiculous to hold grudges and anger and hatred and animosity, even to the people that do wrong, even to the people that do things that we disagree with. But I went another step in my thinking about this. What is it that we disagree with Ralph Nader? He since the 1960s has been doing this, fighting for the person that doesn't have what the rich have, fighting for people's safety, fighting for economic justice. And while I or you may not like decisions he's made or things he's done or ways he's behaved or whatever, as Al Gore said to me, I don't blame Ralph Nader. I blame myself. It was Gore's job to win that election, to convince people to vote for him. And all Ralph did was do what any free citizen can do in any democracy, which is run for office. And that's what he did. And he stood for the things that he always stood for. He stands for those things today. And, my heart has the room to make peace with Ralph Nader and to welcome him into joining our fight to remove Donald Trump from the White House and to get somebody in there who's going to fight for the things that we all believe in. We have no other choice, and there is no time to be living in the past right now. We have to be all about the next minute, the next hour. February 3rd in Iowa, February 11th in New Hampshire, Super Tuesday, the whole bit, this whole spring. My friends, all of us have to get busy. And I welcome Ralph Nader to be part of this. Ralph Nader, thank you. And thanks to those of you who were willing to listen to my little rant here about forgiveness and redemption and knowing who's on whose side here and welcoming them. That's it. That's it for tonight. Thank you.